Our special.
All right, here we go. Welcome to a chat with Frannie James, author of The Sylvan Hotel, a Seattle story. I'm Patricia Murphy. Tonight's event is presented by Hinton Publishing, whose message is to elevate the work of those historically under-invited from the publishing industry. Me and Frannie are going to talk for about an hour. Maybe we'll have some reader questions at the end. Remember to check out all of the great publications offered by Hinton online at hintonpublishing.com. All right, Frannie, I think that is all the business we have to take care of. The Sylvan Hotel is a fictional upscale hotel in Capitol Hill. The book is part coming of age novel, part love letter to the 90s, a time when Seattle's grunge bands were tearing up the music scene. We find the main character, Joann, behind the desk in the hotel lobby, answering calls, coordinating service while celebrities come and go. It's an exciting time to live in Seattle, but this job is just a way station for Joann. Like most of her coworkers, the future is yet to be revealed. At its heart, this is the story about a young woman learning about who she is. Author Frannie James, really great to talk to you. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for doing this with me, Trish. I appreciate it.
So, this is the story about a young woman on the runway taking flight. How does your main character, Joann, see herself?
I think there's a great line in the book where Joann says it's kind of like being accidentally on the inside. She's grown up in South Seattle. She's trying to find her way. What's the corporate path? But she's not very well connected. Her dad is a teacher, her mom's a homemaker. They're not really rubbing shoulders with Seattle society. And yet, because of their religious beliefs, Catholicism, they've put Joann and her siblings in Catholic schools. And a large part of that has been in neighborhoods and with classmates that are more toward the upper class part of the city or the spectrum, so to speak. And so I think while she has had good experiences in that, she still feels a little bit maybe like she's an imposter, like accidentally on the inside. So I think that's kind of at the foundation of a lot of Joann's choices and how she thinks and where she's trying to get to and who she latches on to, where she feels safe. I think that all comes from not being too secure in where she's at. Regardless of how nice people have been, she's still very aware of the differences there.
And the Sylvan Hotel is where Joann works, but it is also the epicenter for your characters. What kind of place is the Sylvan? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's an older, kind of like European boutique luxury hotel. And what's great about the Sylvan Hotel is that most of Joann's teammates have just kind of collided all at the same age and they're all at the same place in life. Everyone's trying to get somewhere else. But they all have their little quirks and, charismatic personalities. There's a room service attendant who's very chatty. He's all about the latest dish, whether it's, hotel guest gossip or his favorite sports team or, the music scene. There's a pastry chef who, you might find all dressed in leather out at, Neighbors or one of the gay bars at night, but he's quite the, very proper protocol type individual when he's at the hotel making his very intricate pastries. There are various front desk staff. One, Joann's bestie, is studying, or actually she's substituting. She's trying to get into teaching. There are valets that are not quite sure about what they want to do next, or maybe they went to school for one thing, but now they're kind of changing their mind. So I think the main thing that they all share is that they all want to get somewhere else. Some of them are more sure than others about what that looks like, but they're all kind of sharing this collective in between phase. And so that path and the hotel brings them all together. And most of who Joann interacts with are the other people working the swing shift with her, which is the evening shift.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about that because that swing shift, in a way, keeps them sequestered from the
Yeah,
rest of the world and
yeah,
creates an interesting environment. They often don't go to bed until after 3 a.m. Sometimes it's
that's correct.
4:15.
Yeah.
Does it also hold them back? How does that function?
That's an interesting question because, like, in one of the interviews I did, I was talking about how, if you're working 3 to 11 and you're all wired after your shift, who else is there to hang out with at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night? Well, the people you just spent 8 hours with, right? So you might be with someone standing, side by side for 8 hours on shift. Then you go to the bar down the street afterwards and you're together for what, 12, 1, 2, 3 more hours. And then you have to sit in the car and do the debrief on what happened at the bar. So that's a few more hours. So I would think that, or I would say that there are pluses and minuses, right? Because the Sylvans, as I like to call them collectively, become very, very close. That's a found family situation, right? They obviously spend more time with one another than their partners, their families, sometimes even their closest friends. Sometimes they find themselves wondering, well, maybe now these people are starting to be my closest friends. And that can cause a bit of a dilemma at times, especially when it comes to partners and people who are in relationships, but then who are spending more time with people at the hotel. So there's a lot of great deep connection, but it can also cause confusion. And maybe it can also hold them back a little bit. Like I say, Joann's on this path. She's like, hopefully this time at the hotel isn't going to take too long. She's there to pay bills and she's going to be on her way. But she gets very sidetracked. The book spans about a 3.5 year journey with these people. And so I don't know, you can argue, does she regret those experiences? At the end, there's one character in the book that leaves before everybody else. He's kind of a more minor character, but at one point, Joann's like, was he stronger or lonelier, having, kept a little bit of distance between himself and the rest of the crew? Like, was he better off for it? Was he stronger, or maybe both? So I think there are pluses and minuses anytime you get into such a tight little micro community like that. Like, some of the best
Yeah.
connections in your life can be found there, but then, you might also be limited, and it can throw a wrench in other plans or relationships.
Things definitely had a way of getting sidetracked in there
Yes.
for her.
Yeah.
Your book tries to capture Seattle during a pivotal time in the city's history. Members of famous bands are always checking in or out. Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, Courtney Love makes an appearance. So does the suicide of Kurt Cobain. After a certain point, grunge defined Seattle. And I'm curious what kind of texture you were hoping to add to the narrative by writing this book.
It's interesting because people were asking, oh, a 90s Seattle book. What made you want to write a 90s Seattle book? But I originally wanted to write a coming of age book. I always thought if I wanted to write a book, if I was going to try my hand at a book, it would be a coming of age book. But 90s Seattle and my own coming of age experience all collided. And so a 90s coming of age story found me. I like to say the universe had plans, right? So I wanted to write a story that was authentic to the time and experience, but I also realized and noticed over the years that as my own story that I wanted to write was percolating, that this period in time generally is narrated through a very narrow lens. Grunge dudes, grunge bands, grunge groupies, grunge drugs. And there were many other people living out other experiences in Seattle at that time. Surely they overlapped, as they did with Joann and they did with me, but that's not the whole story. That's not the only story. And another thing that I've liked to say in interviews is if that's supposed to be Seattle's most storied era, then surely we should be telling more kinds of stories about it, right? So I wanted it to be authentic to the time. I wanted it to honor the grunge stuff that I loved. But most importantly, at the core, I wanted to tell a coming of age story and something a little different, right? From a different perspective. Obviously, you know, Joann is mixed race. She's a woman. A lot of the books that we have about that era basically like kind of male dominated or through the male lens, you know, and they're just really more about the actual music and the bands. And well, what about the people that went to see those bands? What about working class people just in the city living their lives at that time? And so a lot of it was informed by a collage of people and experiences and events that I encountered during that time. And again, we have one movie about young people during that era. And again, that's a very beloved movie, and I don't begrudge anyone, you know.
Are you talking about Singles?
Yeah, yeah. But I didn't see myself in that movie, and I didn't see my friends in that movie, and I just wanted to write something a little. And again, it's fun. I love Singles, but I wanted for my story characters that were more I don't know, less caricature. I hope that's not, I don't want to offend anybody by saying that. Again, Singles has its, you know, it's fine, but for my own, I just didn't see myself and my friends in it, and I wanted to make sure that I was also thinking about other people outside of my own friend group, you know, something that just seemed more authentic to someone was from here, grew up here. So hopefully that's.
Singles was my introduction to the city of
Oh
Seattle.
yeah, a lot of people moved here because of that movie. Again, I'm not, you know, begrudging anyone their love of Singles. I watched it, but I just kept everybody loves this movie, but I don't see my friends in here. Something's not clicking, you know? So
I'm from New Jersey. I feel the same way about The Sopranos.
nice. There you
This
go.
is such an exciting time for Joann. And she finds herself wrestling a bit with changing expectations for herself and about her life and what she wants out of the people around her. How does her upbringing in the city factor into that?
I'm not sure. Repeat that question again. I'm not quite sure how to.
Well, she finds herself in casual relationships with people, sometimes not sure she wants to be in them, trying to figure out who she is now and whether or not she's a risk taker, how she wants to show up in the world. And I'm curious how the baggage she carries from her childhood factors into how she sees herself in those moments.
Um, she's had a really religious upbringing, and she's had difficulty when she's challenged that religious upbringing. So I think from a very young age, Joann has been a truth seeker, a question asker, and so she's gotten in trouble for that. And there are a lot of examples. The book is a great example of someone who has slowly started to lose their voice. There are various points in her backstory where there are examples of, oh, she should say this, but, you know, maybe not because of what's happened in the past. It's gotten her into trouble speaking up. And she's reached this place where she is loved by so many people. And while she wants to figure out and ask questions and is still asking questions internally, she doesn't want to rock the boat too much, I think, at this point. it's very interesting to be in one room with one set of people, be seen as kind of not holding value.
Mm.
And then to instantly walk into another space with a different group of people, and you are suddenly the cat's meow. You are loved by so many people. And based on what's happened in Joann's past, in voicing her opinion or maybe trying to be just be herself, it's just gotten her into trouble and she's lost things and people because of it. So I think while she's still trying to figure things out and ask questions, it's starting to be, she's not expressing as much as what she could be saying. She doesn't want to rock the boat this time around. So I think that has a lot to do with how does Joann lose her voice? She's come to this very beautiful place where she's loved, but I think there's almost a desperation to hang on to that because having not come from that and suddenly having that, she's not going to screw it up this time, right? So she finds herself in some situations where she's maybe willing to kind of, okay, I'm just gonna bite my tongue, or what does this mean? You know, there's a couple of monologues where, what is going on here? What does this mean? But she doesn't, she has stopped voicing those things out loud. So, yeah.
She also has trouble asserting herself in situations where she has an opportunity to meet with someone who could open career doors for her.
Yes.
She has repeated meetings where she never really gets to where she wants to be in these conversations.
Again, don't screw it up. Don't screw it up.
Yeah.
I think there's one line he checks in. She's like, don't sound like a bimbo. Make sure you say, just whatever you do, don't screw it up. And that all has to do with what she says, right? Or what she expresses. And I think, yeah, that's actually a really good question. Like what in her past has led to this, where she's gotten to a point where she's obviously intelligent. There's good questions that are being asked inside, but why is that not being verbalized? You know, what's going on there? That a lot of that becomes an internal battle with herself. And when it comes to actually confronting or actually saying what she needs to say, up, there's some kind of wall there, you know?
Mm. The Sylvan crew hang out regularly after work to decompress, which is a great opportunity for you to include all kinds of local places, some of which are no longer around. How did you choose what to include in the book? And let's talk about some of your favorites.
Oh, um, well, I worked for two hotels in the 90s, and one of them was Kitty Corner from a very famous dive bar. So that was probably my favorite spot. I think there was a year where we broke the record, and I think we went there like every night. Or at least every night we were working, right? I remember stopping by the hotel years later and somebody was like, oh, we heard there was a crew here that used to go to that bar like every night. And I just kind of giggled to myself, yep, that was me. Um, but yeah, there were a lot of great venues at that time. The key being, and what was very key is that you could afford to go out, right? That's what was so great about that the city at that time. There was a lot of cool stuff happening, but it was still accessible to working class people. So I love the Vogue. Um, a friend of mine was feeling very antsy one night. She wanted to go out and check something out beyond just drinking Bud Lights in a dive bar. You know, she's like, I want to dance. We're young and we should be, and I was like Joann, kind of scaredy cat, but also that bold streak at the same time. So I'm like, oh, why the hell not, So we went, and the Vogue was very fun. You had goth girls dancing next to you, and then like metal people over here, and punk people passed out in the bathroom or whatever. It was just very, I don't know. It's so weird because it was supposed to be this underbelly of Seattle, but I actually felt very safe there. And everyone in there seemed to, there was just a great feeling of community and celebration and joy of just coming together and listening to this great music and being alive, right? Young and alive.
It was a very in some ways uncomplicated time for the
Yeah.
city of Seattle.
Yeah.
Cigarettes were $3 a pack, and I think in your book that's the hotel price.
Yep. It was
So,
indeed. Marlboros, $3. Yep.
man, that you could afford, like you said, to go out.
Mm-hmm.
It was easier. It
Yeah.
was easier to not have a lot of money in this city.
Yeah, exactly. It was all accessible to just regular working class people. You could even go like that. What was so cool is we vacillated between, we had the dive bar one night, we'd go to the Vogue another night. Then there was the Frontier Room, which was a really grungy dive across from the Vogue. But then there was Queen City Grill, which was a little bit more elevated. But then you had Belltown Billiards downstairs. But then we dress up and go to fancier restaurants for, our hotel annual Christmas parties. So there was just such an array, but the commonality again was it was all accessible. But that's the pros and cons of being on the brink, right? There's cool stuff happening, but it's only going to be accessible for so long before everybody else figures it out, right?
It's true. It's true. And I still miss the cam lane. I still miss the cam
Oh,
lane.
yeah. I
Best date in the
love the
city.
Camlin. Yeah.
Best date in the city. Ah, yes. Well, throughout the book, the characters begin to take flight. And for Joann, this becomes both clarifying and motivating. What is changing for her? What is she beginning to understand about herself?
Um, that she needs to be the person um, to help move her forward, that she needs to somehow figure out the next phase for herself. Joanne's had a lot of difficult experiences in life. Fortunately for her, she's also had a lot of heroes in her life. Her beloved uncle, her friend in high school who was there during, really horrible friction with her parents again for, speaking out. Um, there's a valet that constantly looks out for her in a workplace that is rife with, there's a lot of sexual harassment, misogyny, and it's comforting to have someone that's got your back. But as people begin to continue on their own paths, I think Joann has to somehow figure out now how she's going to be her own hero and get on with it, right? That she needs to depend on herself first and foremost. So,
Yeah. Let's take a couple of reader questions. We have a bunch here. The first one I have here is the novel holds a lot of quiet tension rather than big spectacle. How did you think about pacing and restraint and trusting readers to sit with ambiguity instead of resolution?
this is a very difficult one because for me, a big piece of that was I have to write the story that I want to write and take a leap of faith, do that story to the best of my abilities. But your question is right on point because we are in a time where romantasy and Gone Girl type mystery thriller stuff. And again, I don't have any issue with that, but it is what it is where those
Yeah.
genres are peaking right now. So here's this story that I have, like Toni Morrison said, you need to tell the story you want to hear. And this
Yeah.
is the story that I was ready to tell. How do you do that in a way? How do you write a slow burn that keeps up a good pace? Or like what I've said before, a fast slow burn. How do you write a fast slow burn and keep it, authentic and immersive and really still address universal themes and tropes, like stuff that still applies today? And I thought about, why does West Side Story or Grease or The Outsiders still have staying power? And I think at the core of those, again, it's all wanting to be loved and to belong. And so I tried to really remember those pillars in writing this story, like what really, when you're that age or when you're going through a coming of age experience, what are the things that really pull at you? And so I just tried to keep those pillars in mind and to also know that I'm not writing to a trend. I'm writing to this story that I believe in, and I'm just gonna go for it to the best of my ability. And I haven't written any other books, but I'm also a professional writer in my day job, so hopefully that helped a little bit, just like skill wise. But there's no magic formula. I think you just have to know that this is the book that I want to write, and be clear on that with yourself first and foremost, and this is why, and these are the points that I want to communicate, the brutal but beautiful thing that any coming of age experience can be. So,
Yeah.
no magic answer there, but
A leap of faith, too. A
yeah,
leap of faith.
yeah,
Yeah.
big part of it.
All right, here's another reader question. There's a strong sense of longing running through the book, longing for stability, connection, or escape. How did you decide when to let that longing remain unresolved? And what do you hope readers carry with them after closing the book?
Again, no magic answer there. I kind of just followed my heart with regard to the timeline, and again, based on a collage of my people I knew and the experiences I went through, and then hoping what the reader will take away from it. Like, I hope obviously that it can provide some time travel fun, right? Like, whether you were here or not in the 90s, whether if you've even been to Seattle or not. But most importantly, I'm really hoping that the book moves people. We're living in a society that, vulnerability is weakness, and don't show emotion. And that's actually another big theme in the book, is that pushing down of emotion. What happens in the long run the more you push down and push down? And so I guess I'm hoping that the book just moves people. If you're coming of age currently, maybe something will resonate, as it does tackle some pretty universal, timeless tropes and themes. If you're looking back, maybe it prompts a conversation with your younger self. Who are you now, as opposed to when you were in your own truth-seeking years? We always say that with age comes wisdom, but is there something to be learned from our younger selves? Have we left a part of ourself behind with the entrappings of adult life? And I hope, too, that the book can do, through storytelling, maybe support a better understanding of Generation X. I think that labeling Gen X with a broad brushstroke as the slacker generation is a misnomer. I think that, well, we all know there's slackers in every generation, but I think Gen X gets a particularly bad rap, largely because we were the first to start questioning the corporate path in bigger numbers, like right out of college, right? And I think we need to take a closer look at that. Gen X kids are interesting. We grew up without tech. We watched it unfold. And we were also first to kind of maybe, bear witness to a new business model where value is placed on shareholders rather than the welfare of the actual labor force or employees. So Gen Xers dared to hit the pause button, having watched elders lose jobs they'd held for years. Pensions were disappearing. The writing was on the wall, and they saw it. Corporate loyalty, loyalty in the corporate world no longer went two ways, right? So I just think that through these characters, maybe you can get a sense of that, the questions that are being asked, or people that seem to have a path, but then it disappears seemingly, or there is that confusion, or people are taking a pause as they're trying to figure it out. And if you were like Joann or me, not to tangent too much, but early 90s is very different from late 90s. Even if you were interested in, trying your hand at a corporate job, there wasn't maybe one to be had. We were coming out of a huge economic slump. And so I just think that to paint it as the slacker generation is just not really accurate. And ideally, Gen X became the most entrepreneurial generation. So, and I guess overall, I hope that the book is seen as a legitimate, entry, if you will, when it comes to the chapter of what 90s Seattle was all about, and that it could live alongside the otherwise accepted ironclad, narrative. Sorry, that kind of got all tangenty, maybe off track, but yeah, that's what I kind of hope the reader takes away from it.
The Sylvan Hotel centers people who are often pushed to the margins of stories about cities. What felt most important to you about insisting on their interior lives, and what did you want readers to see differently because of it?
um, like I said, not everybody was, a Seattle had a very infamous heroin problem, drug culture. But I had plenty of friends, who have expressed interest. I was at home. I was 20 something at that time, but I know nothing about that time. So here's a character that's kind of, she's got one foot in this glamorous hotel world, then she's got her flannel and her Doc Martens on after hours, and she's kind of checking out this other world. And so you kind of want to give a little bit, I'm not really the insider on grunge, but you want to just give a little peek into that world of what was going on, and at least my experience, what was going on. But yeah, like there was a lot of people in between in life too, right? Maybe you weren't a hardcore drug addict party animal, but again, back to that Gen X argument, you weren't ready maybe to just go straight into the corporate path either. So who were these people that were kind of in this in between, right? Like I was saying about Gen X, what motivated them? What did they want to do with their lives? And what were they doing working at a hotel for minimum wage? And why were these people, what was there something else besides the career uncertainty that was making them hit that pause button? When you are given a chance to really bond with people, does it start to maybe change up your own values and priorities a little bit? So anyway, long-winded again.
Well, and in a way, Joann sees and is involved in this microcosm and starts to realize for herself where she wants to show up in all of this and how this matters. She wrestles with other people's drug use in her own
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a passage where she's like, maybe what was it about drugs? She wasn't some kind of a prude, and it's not like she didn't like to have fun, but she's coming from a family where her mom just started, kidney dialysis, and she
Mhm.
knows that she may actually have to wrestle with that someday, and well, she better be careful. And she's fine to sit there and, what they would say, nurse your Bud Light in the corner, or whatever. I mean, for me, I was always the designated driver. I wasn't out there getting wasted, but I still like to have fun. But that often put me in the, oh, you're the designated driver. But it wasn't like a horrible thing. So
Mhm.
yeah, in the in between, right? There can be a lot of beauty in the in between. Not totally in this camp and not totally in the other camp, just observing it all.
The Sylvan Hotel feels a little like a crossroads where many lives briefly touch. What does that convergence allow you to explore about community, chance, and the stories we never get to fully know?
I think again, this raises a good point about a hotel I worked at in the early 90s where we had so many different people from so many different walks of life. We had retired grandpa type dudes driving the hotel limos or town cars. We had a woman from Laurelhurst, country club scene who was managing at the front desk. We had a kid from Shoreline in there. We had, kids from South Seattle in there. We had a girl from Aberdeen who was the wrong side of the tracks. I mean, I don't think nowadays you would see such an array of people working together. So that was very interesting for me in life and in writing this story of putting all these different people together in, like you said, this small community, and being able to really interact with different people from different walks of life. And I would wish that experience for more 20 something people, as they get started out. A lot of people say, oh, everyone should work at least one job in the service industry, right? Before going on to any other job. But it's not just for the work ethic, it's also having the opportunity to interact with people of many different backgrounds, socioeconomic, ethnic, what have you. It's just getting a slice of the real world instead of whatever, outside bubble you may be used to, be that, one neighborhood in the city versus working with people from neighborhoods all over the city, or even the state for that matter.
Yeah, that doesn't happen. I think you're right about that. That collection of people may not end up in the Sylvan Hotel today.
I don't think so. I've walked into a couple of those, the hotels that I used to work for, and it doesn't look to have the same variety anymore. And I think that's a sad thing.
The book also pays close attention to the moments most people would overlook. What draws you to the quiet, in between spaces of people's lives? And what do you think those moments can reveal that big, dramatic scenes cannot?
I think if you get so caught up in big drama, I think sometimes you do miss the more sort of like, I don't know, like intimacy doesn't have to be sex, right? It can just be sitting back to back with someone and having a conversation, and that feeling of being connected. And I think connection is often it goes missing when we have tons of drama. And again, I like mystery thrillers just as much as the next person, but I think we start to lose the concept of what intimacy is. Is it like, a major sex scene? Or is it, like you said, having a quiet moment with someone, and sometimes maybe not saying anything? But I don't know, there's something in the energy of that I think provides value and connection. And if you are talking, like what does that reveal about a person when there's not exciting stuff and drama going on? What is to be found in those everyday moments, real life moments? I think you can learn a lot about a person just working side by side with them. And in Joann's case, I make a point of showing in the hotel scenes, it's very mundane, right? All the tasks that they do, checking in, checking out, oh, you need your car? Let me call the valet. It's the same thing over and over and over. And you'd be surprised, like in those in-between moments, what you can get to know about a person as you sit there and you pass time together, right? Talking, not talking. I just think there's a connection that can happen. And today we are so often missing out on connection. It's just tied to, hookup culture. Oh, that's intimacy. And it's like, I don't think so. I think we're missing out on what real intimacy and connection is between people. And again, sometimes that means a long conversation with your bestie in the bar after hours, but sometimes that could just be sitting back to back quietly, together, reading newspapers and watching TV while the fire crackles in the lobby, So, yeah, it just, go ahead. Sorry, I'm rambling.
A lot easier to do in that analog time.
Yeah. I was having a conversation with someone the other day about, sitting around the table. Can you imagine now? There's a scene where Joann and all her friends go to their favorite bar at the beginning. There's probably like eight of them. and there's no phones, there's no scrolling. They're all present in the moment. And so again, maybe you're not having like really deep philosophical conversations. And as I like to say, a lot of them don't communicate very well with each other, but they are still more present with one another and they are connected because of it.
Yeah.
So
There's a scene, and I can't remember exactly what happens. I believe it probably has to do with a love interest where she's upset in the car, and she just sighs and says, "I'm hungry. Can we go to 13 coins?" And I'm like, that's where you go. That is where you go when you're sad and you need to tuck in to the to the 13 coins, you know? Yeah. Yeah. We've been talking a little bit about how different Seattle is now, and I'm curious how you see the city now and what remnants of the Sylvan in your book still exist.
oh, that's such a tricky question. I'm always going to love Seattle. I'm a Seattle native. All my great memories are here. My family is here, but there's a sadness of watching so much of it disappear. The Seattle that so many people have moved here for is disappearing. So while I will always hold a great love for the city, there's also a sadness because most of what's in that book is gone. So it's kind of it's very bittersweet, right? I'm glad to still be living in the Pacific Northwest, but at the same time, I'm sad for what's disappeared. I think that Seattle's soul is kind of lost under developer rubble.
Mm.
And we were talking the other day about what could we tell younger, what would we hope for younger generations who don't have this experience with the older neighborhoods. And it's like, watch out for your community. What guardrails can we instill to better safeguard against continued gentrification and people getting pushed out? And again, you're going to lose the range of people that Seattle is famous for. Growing up in 98118, that was the most diverse zip code in the country. Can it stay that way? I don't know. And I think that will be sad if that changes. And that, so yeah, a lot of what I love doesn't exist anymore. But we were also talking in another interview about are there places in the city where I can still feel the old Seattle? And for me, that would probably be the Pike Place Market. And I had friends, great family friends living on Capitol Hill for many years. So probably the area just a couple blocks down from Volunteer Park, like near the Volunteer Park Cafe, that residential area.
Yeah.
When I walk around in there, I feel like it hasn't all disappeared, right? I've got great memories up there. So, but there's not a lot. I mean, so much of it has changed. So, yeah, it's a tricky thing. I love Seattle, but I miss Seattle at the same time.
How was it writing about Seattle like you remember it? Was it how did it feel?
Kind of heartbreaking.
Mm.
Like it was beautiful to go back. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about writing and reading. It transports you. So it was kind of fun to do some time travel of my own, right? To revisit stuff even further back, right? There's 80s and 70s flashbacks in the book, obviously, because I grew up here. So there's some joy in that, but there's also heartbreak, right? Because, things keep moving forward. You can't stop time. And while I appreciate progress and I'm not against progress, I just think that, hopefully we do a better job going forward as to protecting, where we've come from. There's value in honoring and safekeeping our historic treasures.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, I have a couple more reader questions here. Let's see. Here's one. Many of the people in the book are doing their best with very little love, money, safety, certainty. When you were writing this book, what did you want to protect about the most? Oh, this is a good question. And what was the hardest for you as a writer to leave unprotected on the page? A lot of process questions. This is a good one.
What did I want to protect about them? That's probably tied to that Generation X question. Who are these people that,
Mm.
they should be in corporate jobs by now? Like, what, this guy's parking cars and he's, must be 26? Like, what's the problem there? Maybe there isn't a problem. Maybe they're asking important questions. Maybe there's value in hitting that pause button. And maybe the
Mm.
corporate path isn't for everybody. So that kind of stuff I felt protective about. Sorry, what was the second part of the question?
What you wanted to protect about them, and what was let's see. Now I've lost my question because
Sorry.
no, that is fine. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Here they are. Here they are. Here they are. What did you want to protect about the most, and what was hardest for you as a writer to leave unprotected on the page?
Probably in wrestling with my own ideas about, or my own understanding of, when Joann, there's that monologue where she's like, maybe I'm not feminist enough. That was really hard to write, some of that stuff about love and hookup culture and casual sex and, you know, really going back to my own experience with that in the 90s and being able to really say what I wanted to say and not mangle it, not be misunderstood. I think that part I
Mm.
revisited several times. And even in one of the scenes where, Joann is uncertain, that, I'm pulling some of that from my own experience. And I remember Marilee, my really great developmental editor, I think when there's stuff in there that you're pulling from your own experience, it can be really difficult because you're putting yourself out there and your own opinions that are coming through, and you don't want to sound like you're being judgmental, but you still have to pull from what does this mean for me and what was I feeling when I was going through it. And so I had a tendency a couple times to just skip to the next thing, and Marilee was like, we need a little bit more of a bridge there. What is going on in her mind? I don't know. I don't want to talk on, but that's what you need to
Yeah.
bring to that. And sometimes it was only like two sentences or a sentence, and she's like, that's what I needed. I just needed to know what was going on there in her mind to jump from A to C, like what explain this, what we cannot read your mind and we cannot read.
And Joanne does find herself standing up in situations and taking control where she maybe in the beginning of the book would not have. She has a very forceful incident where someone puts their hands on her and she pushes them away, which is maybe out of character for the initial introduction of Joann. The Sylvan Hotel suggests that places uh, remember, the Sylvan Hotel suggests that places remember even when people don't. As a writer, how do you think about memory, both personal and communal, as something that lingers beyond any single character? Ooh, that's deep. That's a reader question. Mm. Personal and communal. Mm. Mm. We all have stories we tell ourselves about who we are in the world, you know. I wonder if writing this book, deconstructing some of your own personal memory, taught you things about who you were and what you may have learned along the way here. Yeah. 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 This is your first this is your first novel, so what did you learn along the way here? Yeah.
You have another novel in mind? You're going to go through this again? Are you excited? How do you feel at the end of this? Mm. Fantastic. Well, Frannie James, we're almost out of time, but before I let you go, let's talk a little bit about what you hope your readers take away from their time with this book. What should stick?
Well, it certainly captured that electric time of your life and that in between piece of trying to figure out what's next, where the possibilities are almost endless in your mind and not at the same time. Really fun novel. Frannie James, thanks so much for taking the time. Yeah, we're getting close. We're getting close. Frannie James' debut novel is The Sylvan Hotel, a Seattle story. Check it out and all the other great titles from Hinton Publishing at hintonpublishing.com. Thanks. Oh, look at that 10147.